Ancient Sumerians were more than familiar with handbags, or perhaps objects that modern people perceive as such. Several Sumerian carvings include depictions of handbag-like shaped items. In the dust of Mesopotamia, a strange symbol was found: a handbag. But this was no ordinary object. It was carried by the gods. Then that same symbol was found across the Atlantic in Mexico. It was found at a site from before the Ice Age. This is impossible. What most people don't realize is that the bag itself isn't the mystery. The real secret is what was in it. And the answer points to a lost technology, a global civilization, and a truth that could change everything: Mesopotamia's impossible object. The story begins in the cradle of civilization. We're talking about ancient Mesopotamia, in the ruins of the great palace of Nimrud. This city in modern-day Iraq was a jewel of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, a place of immense power and wealth. Imagine being there in the mid-1800s. An English archaeologist named Austen Henry Leard is digging in the desert, uncovering the lost palace of one of history's most fearsome kings, Ashurnpel II. This king, who reigned around 3,000 years ago, wasn't just a ruler. He was a conqueror, and he built this palace as a statement of his absolute power. The walls were lined with massive slabs of gypsum alabaster, stone panels stretching over 9 feet high. And as Leard and his team carefully brushed away the sands of time, they found themselves face to face with incredible towering figures carved deep into the stone. These figures didn't look quite human. They are known as the Opalu. So here's the deal with the Abkalu. These were not just decorations. They were semi-divine beings, wise sages who, according to legend, survived the Great Flood. A story that existed in Mesopotamia thousands of years ago before it was written down anywhere else. These beings, often shown with eagle heads or vast feathered wings, were said to have brought the gifts of civilization to a primitive humanity. They taught people writing, farming, law, and architecture. This is where the story gets really strange. The ancient Sumerian texts, which predate the Assyrians by thousands of years, are very specific about this. They say the first and greatest of these Apkallu was named Owans. And get this, Oannes was described as a creature that looked like a fish, but with human feet, a human body, and a human voice under its fish head. The legend, as recorded by the ancient historian Barasus, states that Owans would rise from the Persian Gulf every morning to teach the Arak primitive humans. He gave them insight into letters, arts, and all kinds of sciences. He taught them to build cities, found temples, and compile laws. He explained the principles of geometry and farming. Then every evening at sunset, this fishman would dive back into the sea to spend the night. This story of a non-human civilizer god coming from the water is at the very foundation of the world's first civilization. And now back to the palace at Nimrud. As archaeologists looked closer at the carvings of these winged Abkalu, the descendants of Owens, they noticed the figures were almost always carrying two very specific, very strange objects. In one hand, they held what looked like a pine cone. In the other, they clutched an object that baffled everyone. It was unmistakably a handbag. This wasn't a floppy bag or a simple pouch. It was a rigid, boxy container with a distinct semicircular handle on top and intricate carvings. It looked less like a bag and more like a piece of equipment. The most famous of these reliefs show the winged Apkallu figures holding this bag and using the cone to touch or sprinkle something onto a stylized sacred tree. Now, mainstream archaeologists and historians looked at this and came up with a pretty simple, safe explanation. And to be fair, it makes sense. At first, they said the handbag, known as a bandu in ancient texts, was just a vessel, a ritual bucket. Inside it held holy water, or perhaps sacred pollen. The cone or mulalu was simply an applicator, a tool used to sprinkle the water or dust the pollen onto the sacred tree. This entire act, they claim, was a ritual of purification and fertility. It was meant to protect the king, bless the land, and ensure a good harvest. For an agricultural society built on the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates, this was a perfectly logical and respectable interpretation. For a long time, that was the end of the story. Case closed. It's just a bucket. But here's the catch. It's not that simple. What most people don't realize is that the Akalu weren't just blessing a tree. They were seen as the original bringers of knowledge. The OAN's legend isn't about farming. It's about giving humanity the source code for society. The bag they carried wasn't just a prop. It was the source of their power, the container for the very civilization they were handing over. The idea that this was just a simple bucket for some pollen started to feel, well, a little thin. Everyone's obsessed with what this symbol means. But the mystery isn't just what it is, it's where it is. If this was a uniquely Assyrian ritual, a local custom from Nimrud, you'd only expect to find it there. But that's not what happened. As explorers and archaeologists dug into the ruins of other ancient cultures all over the world, they started finding the exact same handbag. And that's putting it lightly. This discovery turned a local curiosity into a global puzzle that threatens to tear up our entire understanding of the ancient world. The figures holding it were different. The art styles were different. The languages were different. But the handbag was the same. This one Mesopotamian carving was strange, but it was just one carving. That is until archaeologists started digging 5,000 meters away and thousands of years deeper into the past, a planet of handbags. The first domino to fall was in Turkey at a site that shouldn't even exist. It's called Göbekli. If you haven't heard of it, get ready. This site, located in southeastern Turkey, is considered the oldest known megalithic temple in the world. When archaeologists dated it, the numbers that came back were impossible. Göbekli Tepe is over 12,000 years old. Let's put that in perspective, because the number is so big, it's hard to grasp. This is 7,000 years before the pyramids of Giza. It's 6,000 years before Stonehenge. This is a site built by people who were supposedly primitive hunter-gatherers right at the very end of the last ice age. These people, who hadn't even invented pottery or widespread farming, were building massive complex stone circles with T-shaped pillars weighing tons. Some of the pillars weigh up to 50 tons and stand 19 feet tall. Think about that. How does a small band of cavemen organize the labor to quarry, transport, and perfectly place a 50-ton block of stone? Who fed them? Who designed it? The very existence of Göbekli Tepe shatters the official story of human development. And get this, on one of these pillars, Pillar 43, what do we find? Carved right into the stone, clear as day, are three distinct rigid handbags with the classic semicircular handles. This discovery is a bombshell. It means the handbag of the god symbol is not from Sumer or Assyria. It predates all of them by thousands and thousands of years. It's older than writing, older than agriculture, older than civilization itself. So how did these primitive people know about it? But the mystery doesn't stop there. It crosses an ocean. Let's travel 5,000 meters across the Atlantic to ancient Mesoamerica, to the land of the Mech civilization. Tsimshian are the mother culture of Mexico, flourishing around 1,200 BC. They're just as mysterious as Göbekli Tepe. Their civilization seems to spring up fully formed in the jungle with no clear predecessor. They're famous for their giant carved stone heads. These basalt heads, weighing tons, were quarried from mountains 75 miles away and transported through dense swamps. How? At a Chemek site called Leventa, archaeologists found a carving known as Stele 19. This carving shows a figure, possibly their sacred god, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent descending from the sky. And in his hand, what is he clutching? The exact same boxy, rigid handbag. The visual similarity between the carving in ancient Iraq and the one in ancient Mexico is so striking, it's impossible to dismiss. These were two entirely different worlds, separated by a vast ocean in thousands of years. They had no contact. They couldn't have shared myths, art, or technology. And yet here is the same identical, unique symbol, linked to a god, who, just like the Mesopotamian Owens, was said to have brought knowledge and civilization to humanity. The crazy part is it keeps going. In the Toltec civilization, which came after the Mech, their massive stone warrior figures, the Atlanteans of Tula are also seen holding strange, rigid box-like objects. While some are different, the theme of a container of power remains. Then we go all the way to New Zealand. The indigenous Maori people have their own ancient stories. They tell of their god, Teni, who climbed to the highest heaven and returned to earth bringing with him 3 baskets. And what was inside these baskets? All the divine knowledge and wisdom of the gods, which he then gave to mankind. A different continent, a different culture, a different story. But the core theme is identical. A divine being descends from the sky and delivers the secrets of civilization to humans in a special container. We even see echoes of it in ancient Egypt. In hieroglyphs, you can find intriguing handbag-like shapes. And think about the Ankh. The key of life is held by all the Egyptian gods. It has a looped handle on top and a base. What if the Ankh is just a stylized two-dimensional version of the same device? A key, a tool, a power source. So here's the deal. We have a symbol that appears at the dawn of civilization 12,000 years ago in Turkey. It appears in the cradle of civilization in Mesopotamia. It appears across the ocean in Mexico. The story behind it, a container of divine knowledge, appears in the Pacific. Conventional archaeology has no good answer for this. They claim it's all a massive coincidence. They say it's convergent evolution, the idea that different cultures just independently invented the same exact design for a simple basket. But this isn't a simple basket. It's a very specific, rigid, and unusual design. The odds of multiple civilizations separated by oceans and millennia, all inventing the exact same symbol for the exact same idea of divine knowledge, are so small they're basically zero. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a message. So if it's not a coincidence, what is it? What was so important that it had to be shown to all of humanity? What was in the bag? The God Machine. This is the core of the mystery. The title of this video promises that. What's inside this bag shouldn't exist. And when you look past the mainstream pollen bucket theory, the possibilities get truly wild. This is where we step away from the safe explanations and into what the evidence is really screaming. Let's get right into the theories. Theory 1. The seed bank. This is the most literal interpretation. The bag held the seeds of civilization. This connects perfectly to the Abkalu and Maui legends of gods bringing knowledge in a container. What if this knowledge wasn't just how to write, but it was literal? Think about this. Right after the last ice age, around the time Göbekli was built, something incredible happened. It's called the Neolithic Revolution. Agriculture didn't just slowly evolve, it exploded almost simultaneously in multiple unconnected parts of the world. The Fertile Crescent in the Middle East, the Indus Valley, China, Mesoamerica. Was this an accident? Or were the seeds and the advanced knowledge of how to grow them delivered in those handbags? What if the bag was a high-tech, climate-controlled container that for starting a new world? A kind of Genesis box. Theory 2. The portable power source. This theory is even crazier. What if the bag isn't a container at all, but a device, a portable energy source? Everyone's obsessed with how ancient wonders were built. How were the multi-tonon blocks of the pyramids lifted? How was the stone at Pumapunku in Bolivia cut with such laser-like precision, with angles so perfect we can't replicate them today? Mainstream history says it was all done with simple copper chisels, wooden rollers, and a lot of manpower. But many engineers say that's just not possible. What if the handbag was the answer? What if it was a self-contained power generator? A sort of ancient Baghdad battery, but thousands of years older and millions of times more powerful. This device could have powered advanced tools for cutting stone with sound or frequency. It could have powered a device that canceled gravity, allowing them to lift 50-ton blocks like they were pillows. This would instantly explain why the gods were always shown holding it. It wasn't a symbol of their power. It was their power. It would also explain how themes moved their giant heads 75 miles through a swamp. They didn't drag them, they floated them. Theory 3. The genetic toolkit. This is the most WTF possibility. This is the one that truly shouldn't exist. What if the bag was a biological instrument? Look at the carvings again. The Abkalu are touching the sacred tree. But in other carvings, they are shown performing this act on the king himself. The mainstream says they are purifying him. But what if purify is a mistranslation? What if they were upgrading him? What if the bag held a genetic toolkit and the cone was a delivery device, a high-tech syringe or scanner for manipulating the very DNA of early humans? This would explain the sudden explosive leap in human intelligence, the great leap forward that scientists still can't explain. What if the gods didn't just teach humanity, but literally created modern humanity as we know it? The bag is a DNA database. The cone is the tool to write the code. But let's go even wilder. The consciousness-altering device. This builds on the cone. In the ancient carvings, the cone is almost never separated from the bag. If the bag is the power source, the cone is the tool, and the shape is no accident. That cone shape is a perfectly identical match for a tiny pine cone-shaped gland located deep in the center of the human brain, the pineal gland. This isn't just a random organ. In countless spiritual traditions, the pineal gland is known as the third eye. It's believed to be the seat of the soul, the gateway to higher consciousness. And just like the handbag, the pine cone is a symbol of spiritual enlightenment, is also global. The most famous example is the Pygia, a massive ancient bronze pine cone statue that sits in Vatican City. So, here's the deal. What if the bag was a terraforming device, but for consciousness? What if it didn't just upgrade the king's DNA, but it released a specific frequency, a vapor, or an energy field that unlocked higher thought in all early humans in the vicinity? This would explain the sudden explosion of art, culture, and complex thought on a mass scale. The sprinkling wasn't water. It was an aerosol of enlightenment, the reality projector. This is the one that really breaks your brain. What if the bag wasn't just a tool in our world, but a device that created our world? What if it's a piece of source code, a quantum device that projects or stabilizes our physical reality? The sacred tree isn't a real tree, but a diagram of this reality. Like the tree of life in Kabbalah, the Apkallu aren't just gods, they are programmers or gardeners maintaining the simulation. They are using the cone tool powered by the handbag device to edit the code of the world and keep it from crashing. This would mean the handbag is the most powerful object in existence, a device that writes the laws of physics. That's a technology that definitely shouldn't exist. The Vatican secret. This is the most troubling part of the puzzle. For thousands of years, from the Ice Age to the height of the Assyrian Empire, The handbag was one of the most important symbols on Earth. It was carved into the most sacred temples and palaces. And then it just vanished. By the time of the classical period in Greece and Rome, the symbol is gone. It disappears from popular culture, from religious art, from public knowledge. It's as if the documentation and veneration of the handbag suddenly ceased, leaving only scattered hidden references. So what happened? Theory 1. The visitors left. This is the simplest explanation. The advanced beings, the gods, whether they were aliens like OANS or something else, finished their work. They gave humanity the push it needed, the seeds, the knowledge, the genetic upgrade, and then they left. They took their advanced technology with them, and humanity left alone was like a child trying to remember a complex lesson. We were left to figure things out on our own. The memory of the handbags faded, and the carvings became just myths. But there's a darker, more unsettling possibility. Theory 2. A deliberate cover-up. What if the technology didn't leave? What if it was hidden? Think about it. What if the public knew for a fact that our entire civilization, our biology, our religions, our science was a gift from extraterrestrial visitors? What would that do to the power structures of the world? This is where we have to talk down to earth. Religious authority would collapse overnight. If the divine right of kings and priests actually came from a piece of alien technology, their power would be gone. The new faiths that were rising, the monotheistic religions needed to be the only source of truth. These new powers couldn't allow stories of other gods bringing knowledge. So this effort to hide the truth began. The old gods were turned into demons. The old symbols were declared forbidden. The handbag, once a symbol of divine creation, became a dangerous piece of evidence that had to be erased. And the very institutions meant to preserve history may have helped in this cover-up. For the last century, classical historians and academics have deliberately dismissed or ignored this evidence. Why? Because it doesn't fit the neat, clean, comfortable timeline of human history. The official story is that primitive humans slowly crawled out of the mud, invented fire, then the wheel, then farming, and slowly built civilization. The handbag, this story, it proves that highly advanced concepts and possibly high technology existed at the dawn of time before civilization even began. To suggest this, to seriously investigate this, is a career-ending move for most academics. So it's easier to just call it a ritual bucket and move on. They built a theoretical wall around the mystery to stop anyone from asking the hard questions. But where did the real knowledge go? The Vatican connection. Let's go back to that giant pine cone in the Vatican, the Pigia. This isn't just a random statue. It sits in the Cortile d'Eopignia, the court of the pine cone. It was originally a Roman fountain from the 2nd century found near the Temple of Isis. This connects it to Egyptian and Roman mystery cults. What if the Vatican knows exactly what the pine cone and handbag symbolize? What if the Catholic Church, in its rise to power, systematically absorbed all the old pagan magic and technology and locked it away in its infamous secret archives? The Pina isn't just art. It's a trophy, a symbol that they now hold, the key to the third eye, the secret societies. The knowledge also went underground. Groups like the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, and other mystery schools all obsess over sacred geometry, lost knowledge, and a great architect. What if they are the modern inheritors of this knowledge passed down in secret while the public gets the pollen story? They hide the truth in plain sight, using symbols that only the initiated can understand. The modern military connection. This is the most shocking theory. What if the handbag tech was rediscovered in the 20th century? What if the Roswell crash in 1947 wasn't a weather balloon or even a ship, but one of these devices, a portable power source, A reality projector. This would explain the insane leap in technology the world took. Right after World War II. Microchips, fiber optics, lasers. What if it was all reverse engineered from a handbag of the gods found in the desert? This would mean the technology is not gone. It's just classified. It's being used by a shadow government, a military-industrial complex. While we, the public, are fed stories about pollen. The truth is, the handbags are hiding in plain sight. Actual physical ritual vessels from Mesopotamia. Objects that perfectly match the carvings are sitting in museums right now. The Brooklyn Museum has one. The Metropolitan Museum of Art has one. They are labeled as Assyrian purification handbags. But what if they're not? What if these are the actual devices now dormant, their power source depleted? Imagine if researchers could use modern analysis on them, not just checking for water stains. What if they check them for radiation, for traces of unknown elements, for any sign of quantum residue? The physical evidence is right under our noses, locked in a museum basement, the forgotten ancestors. So here's the deal. We have an impossible object found all over the world, dating back to the Ice Age. We have wild theories about what it was. A power source, a DNA editor, a reality projector, and we have a massive ongoing cover-up. But there is one more wild theory, one that ties all of this together. What if the gods all weren't aliens? What if they were us? Everyone's obsessed with the idea of ancient aliens. But what if we're looking at ancient humans? Think about the timeline. Göbekli Tepe is 12,000 years old. What happened 12,000 years ago? A global cataclysm. The end of the last ice age, a period called the Younger Dryas where the climate went haywire and massive floods and comet impacts supposedly wiped the slate of the Earth clean. What if there was a highly advanced human civilization before that cataclysm? A global technological society that we call Atlantis or Lemuria, a civilization that had mastered physics, energy, and perhaps even consciousness. And what if that civilization was destroyed by the cataclysm it may have even caused? If that were true, there would have been survivors, a scattered few clinging to the remnants of their high technology. Now look at the Oans and Quetzalcoatl myths again. They aren't aliens from another planet. They are civilizer gods who come from across the sea after a great flood. They are the survivors, the Abskalu. These survivors, seeing primitive humanity, the other humans who survived the cataclysm struggling in the mud, decided to help. They decided to reseed civilization. And what was the one piece of tech they managed to save? The one portable, durable, all-in-one device that contained all their knowledge, the handbag. This one theory explains everything. It explains the age. Göbekli Tepe wasn't built by hunter-gatherers. It was built for them by these advanced survivors as a repository of knowledge, a place to restart the world. It explains the global distribution. These survivors traveled the world from Mesopotamia to Mexico to New Zealand carrying their handbags of knowledge, giving the seeds of civilization to different tribes, which is why all the myths are the same. It explains the technology. The bag was their survival kit. It was the power source to build things like Göbekli Tepe, the seed bank for agriculture, and the database of knowledge for writing law and science. This means the Akalu aren't gods. They are our own forgotten ancestors. The handbag isn't an alien device. It is a human invention, the last relic of a lost mother civilization. But this leads to the final and most terrifying question. If this advanced human civilization was so great, where is it? What happened to them? We've been staring at the answer for millennia, and we've been calling it mythology. We see the carvings of the Anunnaki, the figures at Göbekli Tepe, the statues of Mesoamerica. And what do we see? Gods, kings, ritual objects. But what if the handbag isn't just a toolkit? What if it's also a warning? Think about it. We see this object clutched in the hands of beings who supposedly brought knowledge, agriculture, and civilization. We assumed it was a basket of seeds, a water bucket, or some symbolic royal accessory. We were wrong. We were thinking like farmers, not physicists. What if the very technology inside that bag, the power source, the reality-warping device, is what caused the cataclysm in the first place? What if, in their technological hubris, they tore a hole in the fabric of the universe? What if they opened a door they couldn't close? Imagine a power source that draws energy from other dimensions. Imagine a device that can bend space and time. It would be the ultimate tool. But one miscalculation, one surge of power, and the world that was is gone, wiped from the map by flood, fire, or a ripple in reality itself. And what if the symbol repeated everywhere isn't a gift? What if it's not a badge of honor? What if it's a message? A warning from the survivors? The few who crawled from the wreckage of their golden age scattered across the globe, leaving a permanent record. A message left for the next cycle of humanity for us. They didn't have paper. They didn't have hard drives. They had stone. And so they carved their warning into the most permanent medium they could find, etching it onto mountainsides and temple walls. They were telling us what we're capable of and begging us not to make the same mistake. The symbol isn't a blessing. It's a quarantine sign. It's a skull and crossbones for an entire civilization. We are missing a key detail. We see the carvings, but we don't read the language. But the thing is, the evidence isn't just a crazy theory. It's carved in stone on multiple continents, separated by oceans we thought our ancestors could never cross. It's sitting in our most famous museums labeled unidentified ritual object. It all points to the same unsettling truth. Our history is not what we think it is. Our carefully constructed timeline of primitive man slowly discovering fire and the wheel is a comforting lie. We were not alone. And the most advanced technology the world has ever seen is waiting to be found inside the handbag of the gods. So, was the handbag a gift from the stars or a warning from our own past? Let us know your theories in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe.